Imagine if the very laws meant to protect us were actually putting our youth in danger. For decades, we've been told the war on drugs is about safety, about health, and about protecting society. But what if I told you it's done the exact opposite? Hello everyone, Aim McCool here. Today, we're talking about the failed precedent of the war on drugs and why it's time we seriously rethink our entire approach to drug policy. This isn't a rant, this is the start of a comprehensive series where we are going to challenge some of the most harmful misconceptions around cannabis. We'll dig into how the pharmaceutical industry profits from keeping cannabis illegal. We'll look at the real benefits of legalizing certain strains, not just for health, but for agriculture. And we'll explore how smarter drug laws could reduce crime, support mental health, and build a safer Ireland for the next generation. If you've ever felt like something doesn't quite add up with how we talk about drugs in this country, you're not alone, and it's time we talk about it. In the 1980s, the United States declared a war on drugs. Sounds noble, right? But behind the headlines and political soundbites was a brutal reality. The war didn't fight addiction, it fought people. Instead of offering help, it criminalized drug users. Years later, insiders came clean. John Elrickman, one of Nixon's top advisors, admitted that the war on cannabis wasn't about public health, it was about control. Political, racial, and social control. They targeted certain groups, not substances. And yet, decades later, we're still following the same script. But the world is shifting. Countries are rethinking cannabis laws. Some have decriminalized, others have legalized. So what do? We built something better. I'm calling for a responsible, evidence-based approach to cannabis. One that prioritizes safety, healing, and strict regulation, especially in the medical space. That means focusing on strains with high CBD and low THC, the ones backed by research, the ones that help, not harm. Let's put this conversation in context with the actual numbers. According to Ireland's most recent national survey on drug use, nearly 1 in 4 adults have tried cannabis at some point in their lives. Zoom into the last year, and that number drops to 7.1%, with 3.4% using in the last month. But here's where it gets more revealing. Among 20-year-olds in Ireland, 59% have tried cannabis, 22% have tried cocaine, 17% have used ecstasy, and 12% have tried ketamine. That's not just occasional experimentation. That's widespread access and growing normalization. Now, are all users dependent? No. But data shows that 1.5% of people aged 15 plus are cannabis dependent. Among men, that number jumps to 2.5%. And among young adults, it climbs to 3.6%. This is where policy needs to get real. In total, 9% of the population, around 287,000 people, reported using illegal drugs in 2019, and over 6.6% have tried cocaine at least once. In 2021, Ireland recorded 354 drug poisoning deaths. That's almost one person for every day of the year. Now here's where the alarm bells really go off. Ireland's chief medical officer estimates 45,000 people have cannabis use disorders. Shockingly, 80% of new treatment cases are under 18, are kids. Remember, this is just what gets reported. Not everyone is comfortable even answering honestly or participates in these surveys. Along with these standard drugs, we also have new waves of synthetic cannabinoids flooding the market, particularly HHC or hexohydrocannabinol. It's sold legally in vape shops and online, often in sleek packaging that makes it look harmless. But the reality? It's anything but. HHC is a semi-synthetic compound designed to mimic THC, the active ingredient in cannabis. But unlike natural cannabis, HHC is unregulated, untested, and significantly more potent. It's been linked to severe mental health issues, including cases of psychosis in teenagers as young as 13. According to the HSE, around 20% of under 18s presenting to addiction services are now there because of HHC and similar synthetic cannabinoids. These substances are causing anxiety, depression, and in some cases, long-term psychiatric illness. What's worse, despite growing evidence of harm, HHC remains legal in Ireland, slipping through regulatory loopholes. It's not classified as a controlled substance, nor is it regulated by health or food safety authorities. Dr. Colin O'Gara, consultant psychiatrist at St. John of God Hospital, is calling for immediate action to ban HHC and protect young people from its dangers. But so far, the response has been alarmingly indifferent. Our current system isn't just outdated, it's outmatched. Let's talk about something we don't talk about nearly enough in this country: the mental health crisis facing Ireland's youth. and more importantly, why it's happening. Because this isn't just about mental illness, it's about a generation caught in a vicious cycle. Some young people turn to drugs because they're already struggling, looking for relief, distraction, escape. Others try drugs because they seem harmless, even fun. And that's where the trouble begins. What starts as, it's just a vape, or one time wouldn't hurt, can spiral into anxiety, paranoia, even psychosis. And the deeper they fall, the harder it becomes to separate the drug from the struggle. Because when the parties end and the buzz wears off, what's left is the same pain, just worse. And for too many, there's no lifeline, no conversation, and no support. And I know this because I was one of those kids. I've lived it. I've seen how easy it is to fall in and how hard it is to climb back out. So why are we doing this video? Why are we even talking about drug policy, cannabis, and addiction? Because if we don't start connecting the dots between youth, mental health, and how we handle drugs in this country, we're going to keep burying our heads in the sand while more young lives fall apart. Now, this isn't about panic, it's about compassion. It's about facing hard truths so we can finally start making smarter, safer decisions. Let's get specific about what we're really up against, because this isn't just about cannabis. It's about what chronic use is doing to the minds and lives of young people in Ireland. A study from Columbia University found that teens who use cannabis recreationally are 2 to 4 times more likely to develop psychiatric disorders, things like depression, anxiety, and psychosis, compared to teens who don't. And here at home, the picture is just as troubling. According to Ireland's National Self-Harm Registry, cannabis is the most commonly used illicit drug among young men aged 15 to 24 who present to hospital after self-harming. It showed up in 8% of overdose cases. Let that sink in. 1 in every 12 cases involved cannabis. In 2021 alone, there were over 12,600 presentations to Irish hospitals for self-harm, involving more than 9,500 individuals. And the age breakdown tells a heartbreaking story. Among girls aged 15 to 19, the self-harm rate was a shocking 888 per 100,000. That's nearly 1 in every 128 girls ending up in hospital for self-inflicted harm. For young men aged 20 to 24, the rate was 387 per 100,000, still incredibly high. Among men aged 25 to 29, it's about 1 in every 233. And then there's the ultimate cost. In 2021, 449 people in Ireland died by suicide. 80% were men. These aren't just numbers, they're a map of where we're going wrong, and it starts early. A national study found that 9.1% of Irish adolescents, school-going children, report deliberate self-harm. That's almost 1 in 10. Over Christmas, Childline received 820 contacts from young people in a crisis, a 12% increase from the year before. Many were in the middle of active suicide attempts. This is not a fringe issue, it's not isolated, and it's not rare. It's a silent emergency unfolding in bedrooms, classrooms, and hospital wards across this country. And we can't keep pretending that our current drug policy or our mental health infrastructure is enough to stop it, because it's not. So how did we get here? Why are so many young people in Ireland turning to drugs, to self-harm, to despair? It's not just about access to substances. It's about the world around them, a world that too often leaves them to figure it all out alone. We've got a generation growing up with no community structures, no reliable guidance, no safe spaces. Kids raising kids, or worse, being raised by broken adults, repeating the same patterns they never escaped. And in place of mentors or support, too many fall under the wing of crooked older lads, the ones who offer fast money, fake loyalty, and open up a door into a life of petty crime, dealing, and street survival. Why? Because there's just nothing else. Take Jobstown Boxing Club in West Tala, an incredible community space that's been a lifeline for countless young people. But they're now so oversubscribed, they're turning kids away. Not because they want to turn them away, but because they don't have the space, the funding, or the hands. And they know these kids they turn away are the ones most likely to end up on the streets, because there's simply nothing else for them to do. Meanwhile, the real gateway drug in this country, alcohol, is legal, cheap, and everywhere. It's practically a rite of passage for Irish teens to drink underage. Parents laugh it off, society normalizes it, but it's often the first step in a path that leads to harder drugs and serious damage. And beneath all that is something even more soul deep, a cultural emptiness. We've lost touch with our language, our roots, and our stories. So instead, our youth copy what they see in the music industry, Hollywood films, British gang shows, and TikTok hype houses. They're sold a lifestyle, but not the life behind it. And in underprivileged communities where poverty squeezes tightest, these influences hit hardest, because there's no counterbalance. no access to sport, art, nature, or hope. And the cannabis industry, it's completely underground. There is no safe, regulated market. No age checks, no ingredient standards, no accountability. Just dealers, profit, and risk. By refusing to create safer legal alternatives, we've handed the entire market to criminals and left our kids to pay the price. Now, if you saw my last video, you'll already know this, but it's worth repeating. Every day Ireland refuses to legislate, regulate, and tax cannabis, we hand that market to criminal syndicates. And I'm not just talking about the petty street dealers. Lithuanian-run heroin gangs, masquerading as the Russians, Vietnamese grow houses, Chinese triads like the 14K and Wo, the Kinahan cartel, with cocaine routes from South America to Europe, shell companies, hit squads, and a €5 million US bounty on their leaders. These aren't shadowy figures in alleyways. They're running complex, multinational drug empires, and we're making it easy for them. Because instead of regulating cannabis and cutting them off at the source, we've left the entire industry in their hands. Until we change that, they'll keep growing. And our kids, they'll keep paying the price. Now, let's talk about another group of people who are being failed by our current approach. Those who are sick and seeking healing. Right now, Ireland's pharmaceutical system doesn't prioritize health. It prioritizes profit. We're stuck in a medical model that makes more money by treating symptoms than promoting prevention. It doesn't encourage better lifestyles, healthier diets, or long-term wellness. Some of those pills, they don't just fail to heal, they actively harm. Take Xanax, a widely prescribed anti-anxiety medication. It comes with a terrifying list of side effects: drowsiness, memory loss, confusion, physical dependence, withdrawal symptoms so severe they can cause seizures. And that's not even getting into opioids like OxyContin or Vicodin. These painkillers, marketed as miracles, sparked an international addiction crisis. They've killed thousands, they've ruined lives, and they're still being handed out every day like Pez dispensers. But there's another option, one that's safer, natural, and increasingly backed by research: medical cannabis. For anxiety, stress, chronic pain, and a range of other conditions. Cannabis, especially high CBD strains, offers real relief with far fewer risks. The worst side effects? Dry mouth, a bit of drowsiness, maybe a bit of dizziness. Not addiction, not overdose, not death. We could grow this medicine right here in Ireland. Instead of importing expensive pills, we could cultivate cannabis on Irish soil, create jobs, open clinics, provide safe, controlled access to a medicine that actually works. Build an entirely new industry, one rooted in healing, not harm. But we don't, because the pharmaceutical giants see cannabis as a threat. Not to public health, mind you, but to their bottom line. They've built an empire on lifelong prescriptions and repeat customers. And medical cannabis, doesn't fit the model. They don't have to fight this. They could join. Pharma companies could transition their operations, shift towards cannabis-based treatments, and make a real impact with a cleaner conscience. But for some reason, they won't, and they're just so slow to get around to it. The government teases us with this, so we're working on it and we're investigating, but all the information is already there, and it's been there for a long time. Politicians and these corporations walk hand in hand. They profit too much from keeping the public uninformed and the alternatives illegal. Then patients suffer, families suffer, and the cycle continues. And it's not just anxiety and pain. Sleep disorders like insomnia affect thousands of people across Ireland. And what do we offer them? Drugs like Ambien or Lunesta, powerful sedatives that may help people fall asleep, but at a big cost. We're talking about memory problems, daytime drowsiness, dizziness, dependence, and in some cases, sleepwalking, driving, or eating while unconscious. People wake up with no memory of what they did the night before, and over time, they need higher and higher doses just to get the same effect. And a lot of the time, they're not even getting proper rest. It's just sedation at the expense of sleep quality. That's the risk. Now compare that to cannabis, especially strains high in CBD. CBD has mild sedative effects that help the body and mind naturally slow down, without compromising memory, without risky side effects, and without creating the same kind of dependency. THC, for some, can help induce drowsiness, but CBD, non-intoxicating and calming, is where the real long-term promise lies for people battling chronic insomnia. This isn't just about comfort. It's about giving people real rest without sending them down a pharmaceutical rabbit hole. And again, this is something we could be growing, regulating, and offering right here in Ireland. But we're not, because instead of funding research, training doctors, we're building clinics, we're criminalizing it and pushing people back towards pills that make things worse. And it doesn't stop at sleep. Right now, millions of people are being prescribed powerful psychiatric medications, often with side effects that are just as disruptive as the conditions they're meant to treat. We're talking about antidepressants, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, SSRIs, SNRIs, lithium, olanzapine, quetiapine. And with them comes a long list of burdens: nausea, weight gain, memory fog, fatigue, sexual dysfunction, and even suicidal thoughts. These aren't fringe effects, they're common. And for many patients, the medication just ends up being another layer of suffering. Now compare that with cannabis. It's not some silver bullet, but it is a gentler, more holistic option, especially CBD, which has shown real promise in reducing anxiety, lifting mood, easing PTSD symptoms, and helping people regulate stress without disrupting the rest of their lives. No memory loss, no emotional numbness, no chain of escalating prescriptions. And if we brought cannabis fully into our medical system, we wouldn't just help patients, we'd ease pressure on the entire system. Think about it. We spend millions importing pharmaceutical drugs, treating side effects, and managing dependencies. What if, instead, we could grow the medicine here, create a domestic supply of clean, consistent, and therapeutic cannabis, reduce our imports, boost the economy, and help people? Ireland has the opportunity to lead, to show that a modern, compassionate healthcare system doesn't have to be dependent on synthetic drugs with dangerous side effects. That we can put patients before profits and give people real alternatives rooted in nature and supported by science. This isn't a radical idea, it's a better one, and it's long overdue. But hold on, didn't you say earlier that cannabis causes mental illness? But you just said cannabis can help treat anxiety and schizophrenia? That's mad. Because everything we've ever been told says the exact opposite. And honestly, you're not wrong to be skeptical. Studies have shown that cannabis, especially the high THC kind, can absolutely trigger anxiety, paranoia, and even psychosis, particularly in people who are already vulnerable and at risk. But here's the thing almost no one is talking about. Not all cannabis is the same. There are hundreds of cannabis strains. Some sources say over 700, others say more than 2,000, each with different chemical makeups, different effects, and different purposes. Some are really strong. They're intentionally bred that way. They're disorienting. They're intensely psychoactive. Others are mild, therapeutic, and calming, used to treat conditions like anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain. The key difference? THC versus CBD. THC is the psychoactive compound. It's what gets you high. And yes, in high doses, especially for adolescents, it can absolutely trigger serious mental health issues. CBD, on the other hand, is completely different. It doesn't get you high, and it's being researched for its anti-anxiety, antipsychotic, and neuroprotective effects. It's even showing promise in helping the very conditions cannabis is often blamed for, like schizophrenia, PTSD, and severe anxiety, when used correctly in a medical context. So the real question isn't, is cannabis dangerous? It's, which cannabis is dangerous, how much, and for whom? And that brings me to something that's never made sense in Ireland. Why do we treat all cannabis like it's the same thing? We don't treat all pharmaceuticals the same. We don't treat all foods, drinks, or even household cleaners the same. But with cannabis, everything gets lumped together. From gentle, CBD-rich, medicinal strains to black market, THC bombs. It's all treated like one big criminalized substance. And that is not education, that is misinformation. And honestly, it's dangerous. Because when we pretend all cannabis is equally harmful, we blur the line between a healing tool and an unregulated threat. If we actually acknowledged how complex cannabis is, we would have to admit that regulation isn't just possible, it's essential. But instead, we ignore the science and let the black market flourish. So what's actually flooding our streets? Not the mellow, balanced stuff. It's the strongest, most disorienting strains, with no labels, no dosage info, and no warnings. Pure risk. Young people, some still in school, are being handed this stuff with no idea what they're taking. Would we accept that with other substances? Would we hand unmarked pills and unlabeled bottles to teenagers? If we went to the pub and someone says, here's your glass of alcohol, it could be a shandy or it could be moonshine, would you take it? Of course not. You wouldn't let other people take it either. So why are we okay when it comes to cannabis? And while we're busy criminalizing and policing cannabis, people who actually need it can't get it. Many of you already know about this very sad and controversial case story, but it's worth mentioning it again. Vera Twomey is a mother who spent years fighting for one thing: the right to access medicinal cannabis for her daughter Ava, who suffered from a severe form of epilepsy called Dravet's syndrome. Prescription meds weren't working, and Ava was suffering constant seizures, some of them life-threatening. And cannabis oil? It offered her real, measurable relief. But instead of support, Vera was met with obstacles, delays, and bureaucratic red tape. She had to march across the country, beg on national radio, and rally public support just to access something that should have been a basic medical right. And she's not alone. Ireland's cannabis laws are so strict that even non-psychoactive hemp used for food, wellness, and sustainable farming is incredibly difficult to grow here. That means patients, farmers, and innovators are locked out of a system that could be healing people and boosting the economy. We've built a legal framework that makes it easier to prescribe opioids than to access a natural, non-lethal plant extract. We let people suffer, not because there's no treatment, but because the law is too stubborn to evolve with the times. So what's the actual legal status of medical cannabis in Ireland? As of now, under the Medical Cannabis Access Programme, cannabis-based treatments are permitted, but only for 3 specific conditions: spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis, intractable nausea and vomiting linked to chemotherapy, and severe treatment-resistant epilepsy. These are the only conditions currently approved for cannabis-based treatments under the MCAP. If a patient doesn't respond to standard treatments for these conditions, a medical consultant can provide a cannabis-based product, provided it's listed in Schedule 1 of the Misuse of Drugs Regulations 2019. But here's the catch: access remains incredibly limited. Even with these allowances, many patients struggle to obtain the necessary prescriptions. The process is complex, and the range of approved products is narrow. Meanwhile, cannabis has shown real promise in treating a wide range of serious health conditions, things that affect tens of thousands of people here in Ireland. For those living with chronic pain, especially nerve pain that doesn't respond to traditional medications, cannabis can offer genuine relief. It's also helping people with multiple sclerosis manage muscle spasms, stiffness, and day-to-day pain that often comes with the disease. Cancer patients use it to reduce nausea from chemotherapy, boost appetite, and ease the intense discomfort that often accompanies treatment. People with Parkinson's have reported fewer tremors, better sleep, and an improved sense of well-being after using cannabis. I've actually seen a video of somebody with Parkinson's taking cannabis oil for the first time, and the reaction was immediate. I'll try and find the video and put it in the link below. It's even been helpful for those with Crohn's disease and other inflammatory bowel conditions, reducing gut inflammation and making eating less painful. And for those living with PTSD, especially those dealing with nightmares and constant hyper-alertness, cannabis has shown potential to calm the nervous system and help them reclaim some peace. There's also evidence it can reduce eye pressure for people with glaucoma, improve appetite, and reduce pain for HIV/AIDS patients. We're not talking about miracle cures. We're talking about a plant that helps people feel human again when nothing else has worked. And yet, we've made it almost impossible for most patients to access it. That needs to change. Let's talk about where Ireland is putting its money right now and how it's failing us. When someone ends up addicted to drugs in this country, often out of trauma, poverty, or mental health issues, we don't help them, we criminalize them. Not only do vulnerable people get hooked on drugs, they often end up becoming the ones who sell them just to survive. And instead of educating them, guiding them, or helping them build a better life, we lock them up in prisons full of more serious offenders. We turn trauma into crime, and crime into a cycle that repeats for generations. We could be offering safer alternatives. We could be investing in rehabilitation, education, housing, and mental health services. But instead, we're pouring millions into a system that creates repeat offenders and makes the problem worse. Meanwhile, there's a country that did the exact opposite, and it worked: Portugal. In 2001, Portugal faced one of the worst drug crises in Europe. 1 in every 100 people was addicted to heroin. HIV was spreading rapidly through needle sharing. Deaths from overdoses were through the roof. The government realized that punishment wasn't solving anything, so they made a radical decision. They decriminalized all drugs. Not legalized, decriminalized. That means if you were caught with a small amount for personal use, you weren't thrown in jail. Instead, you were sent to a health-focused commission. You were offered support, treatment, and rehabilitation. And the results? Well, they speak for themselves. Since Portugal decriminalized drugs, they've seen some incredible changes. Drug-related deaths plummeted. In the late 90s, they had over 1,000 overdose deaths per year. Now, it's under 300. That's not just a statistic. That's hundreds of lives saved every single year. HIV transmission from needle sharing has dropped dramatically. Why? Because they gave people safe access to clean needles, supervised consumption rooms, and the dignity of being treated like patients and not criminals. And here's something most people don't expect. Drug use didn't go up. It actually went down among young people. More people got help, more people entered treatment programs, and most importantly, fewer people died. Portugal didn't just change their laws, they changed their mindset. They treated addiction as a public health issue and not a crime. And because of that, they could invest in prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and reintegration instead of building more prison cells. They also save money. By diverting people away from courts and jails, they've freed up resources to build a better support system. It costs less to help people than to punish them. And the return on that investment? A healthier society. Now, let's bring it home. What has Ireland done with its own drug crisis? Like most countries, we've done the opposite of Portugal. We've kept things criminal. We arrest users, we fine them, we lock them up, and in doing so, we take people who are already at rock bottom and push them even lower. Our jail cells are full of people with addictions, people who need support, not a sentence. And here's the kicker. Just like Portugal in the 90s, Ireland is facing its own opioid epidemic. We've got rising heroin and cocaine use, methadone dependence, drug-related deaths that keep climbing, and an HIV problem that's quietly growing, especially in communities affected by poverty and addiction. But instead of following the evidence, we double down on punishment. Our rehab centers are underfunded. Waiting lists are long. And in rural areas, there are no services at all. Meanwhile, the Gardaí are wasting time and resources chasing down small-time users, people who should be sitting with a counsellor, not standing in court. We're spending more money to make things worse. So what would it actually take for Ireland to shift? Well, for starters, we need to stop thinking about drug use as a moral failure, when really it's a symptom of deeper issues: poverty, trauma, mental illness, and isolation. Portugal succeeded because it reframed that conversation. They made it about health, not crime, and that shift in thinking opened the door to real solutions. Ireland can do the same, but it won't happen without three major changes. First, we need political will. We need leaders who aren't afraid to challenge outdated thinking, who are willing to look at the data and say, this system isn't working, let's build a better one. Second, we need to educate the public. People still associate drug decriminalization with chaos. They misunderstand it and fear it means condoning drug use. But Portugal showed the opposite is true. With education and support, drug use actually goes down. And that's the important thing. Third, we need investment, real investment, more rehabilitation centers, counseling, housing, community programs, and peer support networks. That is the whole reason why it's so important for people like me who have suffered through this, have done the research, and have come out the other side to show their support. The time for hiding in the shadows and not saying things that could really help people is over. We need to give back and we need to make it better. Not just in Dublin, not just on paper, but in every part of the country where people are falling through the cracks every day. Because here's the truth. Decriminalization on its own won't fix things. You can't just stop arresting people and hope for the best. You need a system waiting on the other side. A system that's ready to catch them, support them, and help them rebuild. Ireland doesn't need to copy Portugal. We can learn from them and go even further. See, we have the benefit of hindsight. We've seen what works: harm reduction, education, and compassion. And we've seen what fails: criminalization, stigma, and silence. Now imagine if we actually built a system that took the best parts of Portugal's model and added even more. We could create a drug policy rooted in science, support, and community. We could invest in mental health, in youth programs, in safe consumption spaces, and real alternatives for people who have been pushed to the margins. We could shift from a culture of shame to one of healing. And in doing so, we wouldn't just reduce addiction, we'd reduce homelessness, violence, poverty, and suicide. This isn't just about drugs. This is about who we want to be as a country. It's about what kind of future we want for the next generation. Ireland has the opportunity to lead, not by punishing the vulnerable, but by lifting them back up, by replacing fear with facts and building a system that puts health before handcuffs. The question is, will we? We need to make a clear distinction between recreational, unregulated cannabis, often laced with harmful substances, bred for high THC content, and sometimes contaminated with dangerous synthetic cannabinoids, and medical cannabis, which is carefully regulated with controlled levels of THC and CBD offering proven therapeutic benefits. Let's get one more thing straight while we're at it. A lot of people using cannabis in Ireland aren't partying, they're self-medicating, trying to manage anxiety, trying to manage sleep, trying to escape pain, mental, physical, or both. But they're doing it with unregulated, contaminated, and unpredictable products. And that's where the real danger is. Street cannabis in Ireland, like elsewhere, has been found laced with mold, yeast, heavy metals like lead, and even bacteria like E. coli and Salmonella. Some of it is boosted with synthetic cannabinoids, cheap chemical copies that cause seizures, psychotic episodes, and violent withdrawals. And let's not forget about the lack of dosage control. One day, a joint chills you out. The next time you get a bag, it could trigger a full-blown panic attack or a breakdown because the THC content has doubled since the last bag. This isn't just dangerous, it's so avoidable. By regulating cannabis and controlling the market, we can control strength, ensure purity, and protect vulnerable people who are currently self-medicating in the dark. Now, obviously, we want to educate young people whose brains are still forming to avoid this stuff entirely. But imagine if the black market didn't just sell things like Super Skunk, but instead it had access to mild, low THC products in non-smoked formats like oils, edibles, or sprays. No contaminants, no guessing games, just measured, medically aware products designed for well-being. Obviously, it's better to have none of this. But let's look at our society. Are we winning the war on drugs? Has anything gotten better, or is it just continuing to get worse? These benefits go beyond safety. A regulated market would generate tax revenue, create jobs, and relieve pressure on our legal system. We don't need to repeat the mistakes other countries made with over-commercialization or reckless rollout. I don't think any high THC strains should ever be sold in Ireland, recreational or medical. It's simply something we don't need. But Ireland can lead by introducing cannabis gently, safely, and with a clear focus on public health first. Not a free-for-all, not moral panic, just common sense, backed by research and built around care. So what would a responsible, science-driven cannabis policy actually look like in Ireland? First, we have clear product categories. We wouldn't just sell cannabis in its plant form to be used however you want, recreationally or otherwise, like they do in some states in America or in Canada. We'd sell specific formulations designed for specific purposes, with clear ratios of THC and CBD, dosage guidelines, and safety labels. Medicinal products would be available by prescription through doctors trained in cannabinoid medicine. Patients would have access to mild THC and high CBD options. In non-smoked forms, these would be dispensed through pharmacies or licensed dispensaries, ensuring medical oversight, quality control, and patient follow-up. If Ireland ever allows recreational cannabis, it needs to follow a completely different model, one that's grounded in health, not profit. Only mild-strength cannabis would be permitted, carefully regulated for purity, dosage, and safety. Recreational cannabis should only be available in safe-to-consume formats. No joints, no bongs, no DIY home-grow free-for-alls. This isn't about promoting use, it's about taking control of a problem that already exists and doing it better than anyone else has before. If we're going to do this, we do it carefully, intelligently, and with public health as the priority. Not profits, not politics, and definitely not pot culture. We'd also fund education campaigns, helping people understand the difference between healing and harm. And we'd pour the taxes from cannabis sales into mental health services, addiction support, and youth prevention programs, which are notably struggling. This isn't about opening the floodgates. It's about building a system that protects the vulnerable, serves the sick, and cuts criminals out of the loop. This isn't just about removing cannabis from the hands of criminals. It's about putting it in the hands of people who care. Instead of leaving our communities at the mercy of reckless dealers pushing dangerous, untested products, we could bring in a legal, regulated market where businesses actually serve the public. And here's something most people don't want to talk about. The people growing cannabis illegally right now, a lot of them don't want to be criminals. Many of them got into it out of desperation, poverty, or a lack of opportunity. They built the infrastructure, they learned how to grow. But because the system offered punishment, not a path, they've stayed underground. Instead of locking them up, what if we gave them a way out? Imagine offering these growers a chance to go legit, to stop risking arrest, violence, and secrecy and start contributing to an industry that's regulated, ethical, and community-driven. They already have the setup. What they don't have is permission. So let's give them one. Let's offer licenses. Let's offer support. Let's offer redemption instead of a record. And let's offer guidance on how to do this properly and safety so that the vulnerable don't continue to get harmed. Because turning criminals into contributors, that's not weakness, that's smart policy. And that's exactly how you build a system that heals instead of harms. If that wasn't enough for you, here's another really important thing, the economic value. The global cannabis industry is no longer niche, it's exploding. In 2024, the market was valued at nearly $60 billion. By 2031, it's expected to grow to almost $500 billion. That's a compound growth rate of 35%, one of the fastest growing sectors in the world right now. Much of that momentum is coming from North America, but Europe is quickly catching up. Germany, for example, is already seeing billions in projected cannabis sales after legalizing and regulating the industry more openly. Companies across the US and Canada are now eyeing European markets as the next big frontier. And Ireland? We're still sitting on the fence while other countries have already figured all of this out. But if we act now, we could carve out a role in this global movement, one that stimulates real economic growth, creates jobs, attracts innovation, and builds a brand for Irish-grown medicinal cannabis that's trusted worldwide. On top of that, we could become a leader in sustainable cultivation. With our climate and agricultural history, Ireland is in a prime position to produce high-quality, eco-conscious cannabis. This could help diversify rural economies and give our farmers a powerful new crop that benefits the land instead of depleting it. Not to mention low carbon footprint. This isn't some far-off fantasy. The world is already building this future. The only question is whether we want to be left behind or help lead the way. And cannabis is only half the story. Like I was saying earlier, cannabis has a sibling. It's called hemp, and it's every bit as valuable, just in different ways. While cannabis is known for its medicinal and psychoactive properties, hemp doesn't get you high. It barely contains any THC. And yet, in Ireland, it's still treated like a controlled substance. Not because it's dangerous, not because it causes harm, but simply because it looks like cannabis. And that confusion is costing us jobs, innovation, and opportunity. See, hemp and cannabis come from the same plant family, but they're not the same thing. Hemp is typically the male version, while cannabis is the female. Hemp contains only trace amounts of THC, the psychoactive compound that gets you high. It can't get anyone stoned. But because of how the law is written, it's treated like a controlled drug. And here's where it gets complicated. Even a fully legal hemp farm with no cannabis in sight can accidentally produce illegal levels of THC. How? Through natural pollination. If a hemp plant is nearby, or if seeds were poorly sexed, cross-pollination can happen. And suddenly, what was legally classified as industrial hemp is now considered cannabis. That means Irish farmers who want to grow hemp are operating under a cloud of risk. Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because the plant itself is biologically complex, and the law doesn't account for that nuance. So instead of embracing hemp as a sustainable, multi-use crop, we restrict it, police it, and discourage people from growing it. And that is a massive missed opportunity. The Irish hemp industry has seen a 40% reduction in cultivation areas due to these restrictive policies. So here's the thing. If we just updated our laws to reflect the biological reality of hemp and cannabis, Ireland could lead a green revolution. We could set the best standard for other countries to follow, learning from the mistakes of our neighbors abroad. Hemp is resilient, fast-growing, and environmentally friendly. It needs a bit more water than some supporters suggest, but it grows without pesticides. That means less glyphosate and Monsanto products poisoning our food supply. And it actually heals the soil. Its deep roots prevent erosion and improve drainage, which is perfect for Ireland's wet climate. Unlike the non-native trees choking out our biodiversity, like sycamore and rhododendron, it can be rotated in with crops, managed sustainably, and used for nearly everything. Think about it. We could use hemp to make textiles, bioplastic, and even animal bedding. Everyone loves cheap companies like pennies, but there is always this cloud of guilt hanging over us from avoiding how some of these brands source their labor. We could replace cheap, exploitative fashion imports with locally produced, ethical clothing, grown and woven right here in Ireland. We could create rural jobs, bring new life to farming communities, and build an industry that's clean, green, and future-focused. And there is one even more amazing use for hemp: biofuel. Right now, it's not the most efficient option, but Irish researchers, given funding and freedom, could innovate and improve on that. People who talked about this in the past were dismissed as there was not enough basis to invest in this. However, these days, the global hemp industry is booming. In 2024, the hemp market was worth nearly $10 billion. By 2032, it's expected to grow to nearly $48 billion. That's not wishful thinking. That is global demand shifting towards sustainable, ethical, and versatile alternatives. Countries like China, France, Canada, and the US are already cashing in. They're producing hemp for food, for textiles, for construction, for cosmetics, for biofuel, and yes, for CBD wellness products. China alone supplies over 70% of the world's hemp. France leads the EU, and Canada's been in the game for over 2 decades. And the US, even with all its red tape, is predicted to hit $8 billion in value by the end of the decade. Meanwhile, what are we doing here in Ireland? Restricting it, policing it, and ignoring it. And we are missing out, not just on profits, but on sustainability. Because hemp is more than just a product. It's a solution to the fashion waste crisis, to unsustainable building materials, to plastic pollution, to declining rural economies, even to climate goals. Because hemp absorbs carbon, improves soil, and requires far fewer chemicals than conventional crops. Not to mention, this stuff is a natural bug repellent. Sign me up. So when people say, sure, that'll never work here, I say, look around. The world is moving in this direction. Ireland has the climate, the soil, and the talent. We just need the vision and the laws to match. It's not too late, but the longer we wait, the harder it will be to catch up. It's time for a critical shift in cannabis policy. The truth is, by not offering safe, controlled alternatives, we are not protecting the public. We give them criminal records and not care. We cut their chances at jobs, education, travel, and stability. And then we act surprised when they spiral into crime or collapse. This is a critical failure, and it's one we can fix. It is not only reasonable, but necessary to use the best available science as the basis for reforming our cannabis laws. Ireland has the heart. We have the brains. Now, we just need the courage. It's time to heal, it's time to build, and it's time to change. And that time starts now.